Okay, the final theory for personality development is the social cognitive theory, and you can probably determine what this one is going to be about. The social cognitive idea is that we learn behaviors from conditioning, observing, and modeling, right? So think back to our learning unit when we were talking about the social cognitive. Who were we talking about? We were talking about Bandura, right? So not only are we looking at the actual cognitive side of things, but we're also looking at the observations that we see and thinking about, that's a good thing to do. That's not a good thing to do. So basically what this is focusing on is it's focusing on the social part of things, the environment, and also the cognitive side of things, of how we think about the world around us. So this emphasizes the interaction of our personality traits with the situations that we're in. Okay, Bandura, like we talked about, is the leading researcher for this, and he's best known for his work in observational learning with the Bobo doll experiment. Say hi to Bobo for me. But basically, he also coined the term reciprocal determinism, and what this is that our personality is shaped by an interaction among cognitive factors, okay, our behaviors, and our environmental factors. The idea is that all three of these things combine to form our personality. So our beliefs, values, thoughts, and feelings interact with our outward actions as well as interact with our social influences. All three of these things make up who we are. So like I was talking about, there are three ways that an individual and environment interacts. The first is that different people choose different environments. Think about your friends. Your friends influence the way that you think about school. They influence the music that you like. They influence the clothes that you wear. You might think that they don't, but they do, right? So different people influence the environment that we are in. Our personalities also shape how we interpret and react to events. So some people are calm in situations, some people are anxious. Your reactions in an emergency will be different depending on your personality. So our personality shapes the way that we react to a specific event. And then finally, our personality helps us create situations to which we react. So the way that we act towards others is often in turn how they react towards us. If we are nice to others, then others tend to be nice to us. If you're crabby and mean to others, they're probably going to be crabby and mean to you. So there are three different ways that that we and our environments interact with each other. Okay, self-efficacy. Let's talk about this for a little bit. A person's self-efficacy is their belief about their skills and ability to perform certain behaviors. So self-concept was our idea of how we feel about ourselves as a whole, how close we are to our ideal self. Self-efficacy is our belief about whether or not we can do certain things, okay? So certain behaviors. So we might have a very high self-efficacy for basketball, but a really low self-efficacy for math, okay? So that's the idea. It's whether or not you feel like you are able to do something, okay? The greater your self-efficacy, the more confident you are in your ability to deal with challenges within that particular behavior, okay? So if you are playing a basketball game and you have a really high self-efficacy for basketball, you're really confident in your ability to deal with challenges that might come up in basketball. But if you have a low self-efficacy in math, your thoughts about a math test that might come up, you're not going to feel so confident in it, right? So our self-efficacy has a powerful effect on our behavior. You might act really confident and strong in basketball game, but then when you get to that math test, you're going to act in a completely different way. Why is this not a trait then? Well, because you can have different self-efficacy for different things. It's not generalized across all of your behaviors. It's one particular situation. Okay, personal control. Personal control is whether or not we feel like we are controlling the environment or the environment is controlling us. Okay, so there are two types of personal control. Rotter came up with these two ideas, the internal locus of control and the external locus of control. The external locus of control, external, outside, right, is the idea that chance or outside factors determine fate. Internal locus of control is that we control our own destiny. Think of an example. Okay, if we're going to talk about a math test, if we have an external locus of control, we would think it doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to fail that test no matter what because that test is so hard. That's an external locus of control. I can't do anything to change the fact that I'm going to fail because the test is too hard. External locus of control. Internal locus of control would be, I know it's a really hard test, but I know I can get an A on it if I just really study. I determine whether or not I get a good grade on there by studying. Okay? So internal versus external locus of control. So which is better? Obviously, it's better to have an internal locus of control because that means that you are willing to take charge of your life and control it. Research has shown that internal locus of control people receive higher grades, they're less likely to succumb to pressure, they're more likely to engage in physical activity. Why? Well, because you feel like you can do something about all of those things. You can control all of those things. So what are the limitations? Well, there are situations that you can't control, and then that might really defeat you. Okay, so sometimes there's just things you can't control, but more often than not, it is better to believe that you can take control of your life and do something about it. There's also an idea of learned helplessness. You've read about this before in previous chapters, but we're going to talk about it now. So learned helplessness is the idea that over time, if you are unable to change a particular situation, you're going to become hopeless and passive. Okay, so Seligman came up with this idea actually with dogs. And what he did is he put them into a situation where they were going to be shocked. Okay, and in order for them to get out of being shocked, all they had to do was like push a lever or like get out of a room or something like that. And what he found is that dogs who did push that lever succeeded, right? Because they figured out I can stop the shock if I just do this. Okay. However, when he put dogs into a situation which they couldn't do anything to stop the shocks, they would develop this learned helplessness. They would develop the sense that it doesn't matter what I'm going to do, I cannot change the situation, so I'm just going to accept it. Okay? So this happens a lot in school for teens. Okay? If you are in a class that you feel like you have done everything you possibly can to get a good grade in that class, you've gone to talk to the teacher, you've done extra studying, you have practiced, you've done everything you possibly can, yet you're still failing. Over time, you're going to give up on trying to do good in the class because you've learned that nothing you do is going to help. So you're going to give up. That's the idea of learned helplessness. Like I said, you feel no sense of control over the situation. And then oftentimes this learned helplessness does transfer to other situations. So it could start out with that one class, like maybe you've failed math over and over and nothing you've done has changed it. And so now you're going to feel helpless in that class, but now you've transferred that to every class. It's not just math anymore. Now it's all of school. And then eventually it's everything in your life. This happens a lot to people who are given very little control, people who are in nursing homes or in prisons, and they tend to have more stress and often have high sense of learned helplessness. Okay, let's talk about something happy. Optimism. Optimism is a positive outlook, right? So it's good to have a positive outlook in life. However, we do need a sense of reality to kind of like curtail this excessive optimism because excessive optimism can be detrimental. If we are constantly positive about something, then we tend to be blind to risks such as AIDS or unwanted pregnancy, divorce, or even dropping out of college, right? So if you go into having unprotected sex and you have this sense of excessive optimism, you're just going to do it over and over and be like, well, I haven't gotten pregnant all of this other time, so I'm not going to now. And then you get pregnant, right? So someone who has an abundance of optimism can also be overconfident and blind to risks. Okay, so while optimism is good, it's good to have a positive outlook. We need to, have a sense of reality as well. Okay, so let's assess our self. Okay, so what is the self? Well, our self is the organizer of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. This is the most important item when we are talking to humanistic psychologists, right? So it is our internal organizer, kind of like, as Freud would put it, our ego, right? This is the person who is organizing everything, and or the part of us that is organizing everything. When we are assessing ourselves, we look at our self-esteem. This is our feelings of self-worth. This is our ideas of, are we worthy? Do we feel good about ourselves? And do we have a sense of worth? So people who have a high self-esteem feel good about themselves, have fewer sleepless nights, they do not conform easily to other people's ideas, they're more persistent in difficult tasks, less shy and lonely, and are happier overall. People with a low self-esteem obviously are going to have the opposite of this. However, we do have a tendency to have a self-serving bias. And what this is that we tend to perceive ourselves favorably in situations. We tend to accept responsibility for good deeds more readily than bad deeds, right? So like if a mom is like, who put the dishes away for me? That was so great. Thank you. You're like, that was me, Mom. Thanks. I did it. Versus, I asked you guys to have this house clean by the time I came home. Who didn't do it? And you're just kind of like, so most people do tend to see themselves better than average, especially if we are going to be asking a questionnaire, right? You're going to rate yourself pretty highly versus someone else. This is why questionnaires sometimes aren't always great, because of this self-serving bias. We tend to see ourselves in a more positive light than someone else. Okay, so let's look at some criticisms of this social cognitive theory. What people have said is that it focuses too much on the situation or environment, and it fails to recognize our traits. It doesn't look at our unconscious motives, our emotions, or pervasive traits that many psychologists believe influence our behaviors. Basically, what this is saying is that it's focusing too much on our environment and how our environment is shaping us, and not enough on our own personal internal drives. Okay, so that's kind of the criticism of this theory. When we're criticizing theories, these personality theories, it's often that they focus too much on one thing and not enough on another. And it's usually right in the name of the theory. So humanistic, they focus too much on the self, not enough on the environment. Social cognitive, you focus too much on the environment, not enough on the self. The psychoanalytic, well, they're focusing too much on the unconscious, not enough on the conscious thoughts and traits, right? So that's the idea of criticisms when we're looking at these different personality theories. These theories are all widely accepted by different people, except maybe the psychoanalytic. That one's a little bit out there. Not many people are full on board with that one. But the others are accepted by different psychologists, and they're often psychologists are often characterized by what they believe for this particular theory. Okay, let's look at culture though, because culture definitely plays a role in our personality. We have two different types of culture, individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures. Individualists focus more upon your independent self, and we're looking at personal goals, personal attitudes. This is Western cultures. Collectivists focus more on the collective self. They're focusing more on connections with your family, the goals of the common good, and there's more than just your individual goals. This is more Asian or Eastern cultures, but this can also vary within one culture. So there are some individualists and some collectivists within our own culture, within our own school, within our own classroom.